Welcome to the Exploration course Routing Protocols and Concepts, Chapter 4, Distance Vector Protocols. This chapter will cover the general theory of distance vector routing protocols. You've already studied and practiced static routing and learned generally about dynamic routing. You will learn about the characteristics, operations, and functionality of distance vector routing protocols. Distance vector routing, as its name implies, advertises its routes as vectors of distance and direction. The distance vector protocols you will study in upcoming chapters are both RIP, both versions 1 and 2, and EIGRP, but more on those specifics in later chapters. As you recall, when routers boot up, they only know what is saved in their own configuration files in NVRAM. If the IP addressing has been configured correctly, each router will then discover its directly connected networks. However, if a distance vector routing protocol has been configured, the routers begin to exchange information about their directly connected networks. Upon receiving an update, the router checks the information against its own routing table for new information. Any routes that aren't in its routing table are added. At the point when all the routers have a complete picture of the network is said to be converged. This animation shows R1 sending an update about each of its networks and which interface is associated with that network. It receives an update from R2 about network 10.4.0.0 with a metric of 2 and adds that information to its routing table. That same update contains information about the 10.3.0.0 network, but since that is not new information, the routing table doesn't change. This same process happens with each router in the network until they all have complete information about their neighbors and their neighbors' neighbors. Sometimes, distance vector routing is called routing by rumor. As you work through this chapter, you will see that it stresses a theoretical understanding of how distance vector routing works. As such, the number of activities and labs is limited. However, getting the basics here will make the chapters covering RIP version 1, RIP version 2, and EIGRP much easier. After all, if you understand why distance vector protocols work the way they do, their advantages and limitations, you would be better prepared for configuration and troubleshooting practiced in later chapters.